of what's going on right now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? The energy in the world. So we're gonna get into a little bit of everything.
Yeah, man.
Hey fellas, I think my man Joel Leon is ready to hang out and kick it with us, man. Y'all boys ready?
Yeah, let's get him on.
Let's hang out. All right, 3, 2, 1. And on the first time on the Big Three roll-up, we have my man Joel Leon.
Hey.
Special guest kicking it with us.
Welcome.
A performer, a wordsmith, author, storyteller from the Bronx.
Indeed.
How's it going, my man?
Oh man, it's I'm excited to be alive and be a Black man in this moment. I'll say that. I think, I know we're gonna get right into it, but I think this is a very important, special moment in time. So I think the work, even before we get into all that, just thank you for even being out here and creating a platform so we can have these kind of very complex, I think, and nuanced conversations. But I think, the time is right for not just the talk, but also like how we put in action behind.
Absolutely.
I think we're gonna be having today.
Yeah, action is the key word, man. That's been our word the last week and a half.
We've been doing a lot of talk. We've done this podcast for 3.5 years, so it's been a lot of talking, and we've had these conversations. It seems a lot.
Yeah. So we got into some action and started getting in these protests and street. I kind of hit you in the middle of the night. It was like 4 a.m. I was surprised when you hit me back, man. I was up stressing. A lot of this is weighing on my heart, man. I hit Berg up at 4 a.m. around the same time. I hit our video guy up around that same time. I'm just up doing it, man. So I'm glad you hit me back. I'm glad you're coming on and hanging out with us. I've been following you a while on social media.
Yeah, same.
Familiar with your work. Yeah, I'm familiar with your work. Yeah. Tell us your story on how you arrived to this big platform that you have, and you're working with a lot of dope people. So how did you get here?
Oh man, I'll try to get the long short of it, man. Born and raised in the Bronx, Fordham Road, Creston Avenue. Shout out to 188th, and raised by a West Indian Caribbean woman who immigrated to the States when she was about 20. Mother of three young Black boys that she was raising in the 80s in New York City, in the Bronx, during the Reaganomics crack era.
Right.
Father who was a decorated military veteran who also suffers from paranoid schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And so that I think affected a lot of how he wasn't or couldn't really show up for the family in ways that he wanted to. So verbally abusive, physically abusive, alcohol in the house. And I think for me, I found a way out through art. Art kind of created an opportunity for me to kind of sift through the trauma that I was potentially happening in the household and outside in the community. And letting that kind of guide the purpose, which has really led me here, man, and when it comes to using art and creative practices in order to decolonize systems and systemic oppression, and also strive for Black liberation and how we can unite all communities to really do the work of liberation and what that looks like. So if that's poetry, if that's emceeing, if that's acting, if that's facilitating a workshop, if that's moderating a conversation, if that's protesting, if that's jumping on a podcast with some beautiful humans to chop it up and like really sift through the trauma and the work and the healing that's going to be required to do the work, and using art as a catalyst to do that. That's kind of where I try to show up.
Now you've been pretty busy, man. You said action is the word, man. So what has been your way of getting out here and kind of getting everybody's attention that's not in, like, we are aware of what's going on,
right?
But how are you reaching the demographic and the people that don't know what's going on out here in the world and making them aware of our situation?
And I think, for me, part of the work is it's always been art. Like I look at Toni Morrison, God bless the ancestors, as a beacon to that work. You know what I'm saying? And like looking at, and I mean, we can go to, Amiri Baraka, Nikki Giovanni, Sonia Sanchez, Audre Lorde, like the great poet laureates of our time, who for me kind of created a lane to use art as a form of activism, and to use art in a way that galvanizes and also empowers and inspires the community to do the work, while also highlighting the history of oppression in America, in the States. Art has also given me a really sound opportunity to show up in the moment, because that's what I do best, and creatively show up in the moment. So like, like right now I'm reading Freedom Dreams that was recommended to me by the beautiful sister, Dr. Shamel Bell. And Freedom Dreams, which is written by Dr. Robin D.G. Kelly. Essentially what it talks about is Black liberation through the imagination. And specifically treating social movements as a form of poetry. Because what poetry really does is it kind of takes the doors off the hinges when it comes to how can we reimagine systems and structures, right? So how do we, what does the world look like if there was no such thing as like voter fraud? What would the world look like if there wasn't a president? Like, what would the world look like if capitalism didn't exist? Like, there are ways to explore that through the art. And that's one fold. And then the second part of that is making sure I'm uplifting the voices that have been doing the work prior to me coming into the game. Like, there's been a lot of Black women who have been able to, like, I've been trying my best to support their voices with my words and also with money. And so showing the community, especially white allies who want to do the work, here's some homework. Here's how you can show up in a way to, like, not just have the conversations, but attach tangible actions to the conversations after the work is done.
Josh here.
Yeah, what's on?
Talk about allies, and I assume you're talking about white people.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. And to be clear, POCs, and I think that's a broader conversation we might get into while you're talking. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So we're about that action, and one of the things that I see out there is great energy.
Yeah, for sure.
I was walking through my neighborhood just about 2 hours ago, and there was a group of 200 protesters walking through my neighborhood. Yeah. And I joined them for a few blocks. I was out there on Sunday, and I was back with them today. Yeah. And part of the reason why I join them is to let the young kids know that we are listening, that we are here, that we do support them. Like, I might not be throwing my fists up and yelling and screaming as loud as they are.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, how do we keep this energy going through the elections? Because we know Americans, we know how lazy we get, we know how forgetful we get. We're only in the beginning of June.
Absolutely.
How do we keep this energy going?
I think that's a very good question, Josh. I think that's the question that's kind of plagued every social movement that we look at. And unfortunately, what tends to happen is it takes some level of catastrophic event. Like when you look at the deaths in tandem, right, of like a Breonna Taylor, of an Ahmaud Arbery, and then this the murder really of all these, and George Floyd. I mean, even now when we attach David McAtee to this conversation now as of late, that creates the impetus, right? And then you look at COVID, which is almost, I think, that served as the powder keg, because motherfuckers is already tired, right?
Right.
Folks are tired. Folks are like,
and at home with time on their hands.
Exactly. It's like, yo, I'm ready to burn some shit. I'm ready to yell about some shit. I think part of the work and part of movement work and strategy is really giving people tangible, sizable things that they can do. Because like what I'm seeing on social right now is empowering for me. Because even being a part of like the Ferguson uprising, like when I was doing a lot of heavy writing around that time, and I think that might have been around the time, maybe Timothy, you and I connected. There might have been earlier.
Yeah,
like
it was around that time when I started seeing like your work and your wordsmith. I like guys that can use words well or whatnot, man. So yeah, that's around that time.
Yeah, and that's for me. That's where the energy is, But I think this for us, it's going to be about, okay, how we continue to share resources. How do we continue to educate each other? Because I think once you educate people, people naturally feel empowered. You think about when I think about some of the folks we used to label as bad kids in school, and a lot of it wasn't that they were bad, but the energy wasn't being used appropriately.
Right.
And people weren't looking at the effort that could be put into educating a human being to show them there's opportunity here. And I think what I'm seeing now is for like POC allies and white allies, there are folks who I fucked with, who I loved and cared about, who had never really approached me about this kind of conversation. It would have been like, hey, Joel, I'm here for you. I'll support you, whatever you need. But now I got folks coming up to me that are like, yo, I'm fucking upset. What do I need to do? Which is a very different kind of conversation. Like What you need is very much in a healing capacity, which I love. But what do I need to do is very actionable and very like, how do I get to show up in a way that's not just about healing, but how do we break some shit, and break some shit, not in the sense of like burning down a building, but that's a conversation.
And also how to be respectful doing it, because like as a white person, right?
Yeah.
It's like you want to be involved, but you also don't want to be involved in a way that makes a mockery of the protest, that upstands the protest, that takes away from the protest. So I see a lot of white people, my friends, I'll just say my friends, it's not that they're racist, it's not that anything, it's maybe that they just don't know the first step. Yeah. So I kind of almost feel like by me going out there, it just shows them like, yo, you don't have to be out here yelling and screaming. Just come out here and listen.
Yeah.
And show the kids that are expounding all this energy that there are people that do care, so that they will come out there the next day and the day after and the day after that.
Yeah.
I think getting out there is just so powerful. And like, that was like my first time protesting Sunday. And like you said, when you get out there, because you're a little hesitant, you don't know what you're about to walk into. And then you just kind of getting off your butt to get busy. And when I got out there, it was empowering when I saw it. Me and my boys talked about it, man. It was,
and it felt nothing like what they made you think the news.
It's nothing like the news.
Nothing
like it.
It never is. And I think, Josh, you make a really important point, because it's something I was saying lately. Like, it's not about doing it perfectly. It's just about doing it. And I think
you said a lot right there.
For white allies,
say that again, bro.
It's not about doing it perfectly. It's just about doing it. It's about showing up. Because Josh walks, the other white homie goes, oh, okay, well, I mean, it's cool. And I think some of the work is also us kind of demystifying what movement work looks like, because a lot of folks tend to think it is about Martin Luther King Jr. walking in front and you hold the placards and like all the energy. And the energy is beautiful. I think it can be very contagious almost when you're like, there are folks who I think are like serial protesters, which like, I just got to protest something because the energy is so galvanizing.
Yeah.
I think part of the work is also being able to say, you don't have to be like, yes, we do want white allies and white bodies protecting us from a police state when we are marching forward. But it's also about just showing up and like, how can I be of support? So maybe that's just holding a sign. Maybe that's you cooking, right, for the folks who are protesting.
Or bringing Gatorades, water. Yeah, I talk about the same thing. Correct.
Movements all have different people who are showing up in different ways in order to lift up the work. And it's important to like, you don't have to be a giant in the movement. But if you're doing something, that's the catalyst for something else.
Right. What is the climate like in the Bronx right now? What are you seeing around New York? We see the clips, and I know I don't even watch the news. All my news come from Twitter, so I see the videos.
Yeah.
What's the climate like there from your perspective?
Yeah. So right now I'm in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. With my lady and my babies. But my mom is in the Bronx. My mom is still in the Bronx, and oddly enough, Fordham Road doesn't really get a lot of attention, especially the Bronx in general. But there was some looting, there was some fires that happened. Like literally like a block away from where my mom lives. And, it's interesting because there were conversations on social about the looting in the neighborhood. And like, when you look at the demo of the Bronx, it's primarily Black and brown folks, Dominican, Puerto Rican, like a large swath of the diaspora. And for me, it was like, listen, property is never going to be more important than human lives. You know what I'm saying? When we look at, and it's something I've learned from Brittany Packyetti, right? When we talk about slaves were property, right? Like, and so there was no care or worry about that property. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you look at Move in Philadelphia, when you look at the Oklahoma riots and Black Wall Street, there was destruction of property that no one cared about because it was Black property. Correct. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it further reinforces the idea when the media goes, oh, this is looting, it's wrong. And it's like, there's a context behind why the things are happening. And if we're not talking about the context, if we're not talking about the systemic oppression that America was built on, then we can't have an evolved conversation about why looting essentially is not inconsequential, but it doesn't tell the whole story. Because even with the Fordham Road, where Moms is at, somebody put together a GoFundMe, and they've already raised $40,000 to take care of the neighborhood, which to me speaks to two things. One, that the neighborhood is going to take care of itself, even in the midst of trauma and tragedy. And B, property is replaceable. George Floyd can get his life back. There's that video of his daughter being like, my daddy changed the world. And it's like, her daddy didn't have to do that.
It's heartbreaking, man.
You know what I'm saying? Like, he didn't have to die in order for us to like recognize and have these conversations. And I got 2 kids, man. You know what I'm saying? And so like, for me, this is like life and death, dog. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Like, this is about how do we show up so that another George Floyd doesn't have to keep dying in order for us to really have evolved conversations about actionable change,
So what do you think is the next step? I don't know what ends this. I don't even know if they're charging everybody else that need it, because it's not just about George right now, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's more people involved. There's a lot more. I'm always forgetting these names. I need to start writing them down. I'm bad with names. But it's a lot more names. And like, what's the resolution here? Because I don't think anybody's gonna stop doing what they're doing, even if the other guys involved in George cases tried and whatever happens. So what do you think's next?
I think it's a few parts, man. I think we need to reform how the police get to organize. NYPD is the biggest gang in America. like by far. You know, I mean, unless you want to compare like the LAPD, but like dudes.
I think PD is the biggest gang. Just say
PD. Word by far, and like the way police unions get to function and operate, the way police get to operate. You know what I'm saying? Like for me, like empathy is a really big component to the work that I do as an artist and also as a person who shows up in the world. And I can't imagine a world and a relationship where the power dynamics are so unilaterally offset, where like officers get the leeway. Like if a person wasn't an officer and did the things that police officers did,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like basic conversation, right? Like if it was just that, police reform is a big part of that, huge part of that. I think we have to look at voter suppression and what that looks like, right? And also when you look at how zones and districts have affected how Black and brown communities get to show up for voting. You know, it's about educating the masses so they understand how important voting is. And if you're not going to vote and feed into the structure, how else are you helping to decolonize and deconstruct systemic oppression in your own way? Are you signing a petition? Are you making the phone calls? I don't think there's one way in. There isn't one way in. I think sometimes it's how do we revamp low-income communities so that we have the same textbooks. There's so many issues that run down the pipeline. And it doesn't mean we have to address every single one at the same time, but what it does mean is going to have to be like this is the best way I can explain, like a Dr. Octopus approach to how we do it, right? There's going to be at least 8 different tentacles reaching out for us in order to be able to do the work in a constructive way.
And like you said, everybody's got to play their own role.
Exactly. And play their role well. And also, you know, and it's something that's plagued of movements, is like, you can't be elitist. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no real time for like, you're protesting wrong, or this is the right way to protest. And it's like,
absolutely.
How are we building each other up? How are we doing the work? How are we challenging each other, but with empathy? And how are we coming up with ways to, like, again, decolonize, deconstruct, but having conversations that are going to be productive to the greater good. And then also doing the work in tandem with each other. No one person is leading this movement, which I think is so special. Because even when I look at Ferguson, it was a byproduct that Black Lives Matter as an organization and as a hashtag and movement became the impetus of the work. And when you look at the Ferguson folks, like when you look at the DeRays, when you look at the Britneys, when you look at the Janettas, right? Like they became like a lot of the central focus of what happened. And what I'm looking at now feels very much so. A friend of mine compared it to like the Arab uprising or even Occupy 99, where there's no real one person that's guiding the movement that's happening here.
Well,
it's a
now
collective energy
around the world too.
It's worldwide now.
It's different.
Ferguson, you're right, because it was easy to focus on individuals in Ferguson because it was one city.
Right.
Here, it's 50 different states, and now it's multiple countries. So how can
the people see the power too? Like once this happens, the world changes. Because now the people know the power is really in the people. Like we see it. We started something. Now it's worldwide. People criticize it at first, saying, "Oh, they're looting. What is this gonna get us?" Now look where we're at. The whole world's involved. So
and it's like, not Black people anymore. It's people. Not just that's what you said.
And let's be clear too. And I love you saying that, because I think about respectability politics, right? And for those who are listening, like the idea that if I do things the right way, that white America will see me and see my worth. This is fucking bullshit. The same thing that Cosby was telling me before he was putting fucking drugs in women's drinks. Like the idea, if I live a certain way, that's going to communicate to them that I'm worthy of life. Nigga, Sean Bell was murdered in his car on his wedding day. You know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't matter how you show up. It's a suit or a hoodie. It's not about whether you're looting or not. The looting is not going to change a white supremacist view of how Donald Trump isn't going to fuck whether you're looting or whether you're doing whatever. Black people are a commodity to him. Everything is a commodity to him. So at this point, it's just about showing up and doing the work and galvanizing folks who are really about doing the work and encouraging them to encourage more people to do the work.
Man. So much, man. I was trying to get a couple of your books. You got some books out, man.
Yeah.
I was trying to get one off of Amazon. They didn't have it on there. I'm gonna order it when I get off of here. I want to encourage everybody else to purchase it. Tell us a little bit about God Wear Do-Rags.
Oh man, so God Wears Do-Rags was a book that I didn't want to write, for being completely honest. It's a book. It's a compilation of like my Twitter affirmations, and not for nothing, I felt like it at the time there was like an influx of, especially like Black storytellers who were putting out affirmational books, right? Like you know, and it's like pseudo poetry, but not really poetry. And
Right.
I was like, man, I want to kind of get caught up in that wave. And then Bernice King, Dr. King's daughter, she responded to one of my tweets and was like, I think you need to do a book of your affirmations.
Jeez.
And at that point, I was like, if Dr. King's daughter is telling me
not?
I need to do this, I need to get out of my way and stop being like, letting the ego dictate how I show up for the work. So I just grabbed some of my favorite tweets together and I put them in a book and tried to make it as authentic to me as possible, which is why each one is kind of chaptered like when yada, 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 then this. Like the idea that you can flip to any page and if you need to get something from it, you can just find it, grab it, and hopefully feel charged for the day. And wanted it to be pocket-sized enough that you could just throw it in your book bag, your purse, not feel the weight of it, carry it around, flip it over.
I'm into that. I'm into those type of books. I think Humble the Poet is somewhat like that as well.
Yeah,
his books are somewhat like that. So I'm interested.
Yeah, for sure.
I usually read your tweets like that. Like not on nothing like weird, but it's just because it's positive. So I used to wake up in the morning when I first started following, just go to your page, and it's like I said, it's like it's hard to find positive Black brothers that are just pretty much delivers it right. You know what I'm saying? So it was pretty much like a daily inspiration. All like my Twitter world, I'm pretty sure you look at mine like, wait a minute, so I got going on sometimes. But because we're in like two totally different worlds of Twitter.
But I love that though, because what you're talking about is the nuance and complexity of the Black experience, man, and the human experience too. But like,
absolutely,
you know, niggas get to show up in the strip club and go to the library after if you want to.
Correct.
You know, like we do such a poor job of trying to pigeonhole the experience for each other. Where it's like that means so much to me to hear that, man, because what for me the work is about also deconstructing masculinity. So so like a Black man can be vulnerable and be like, yo, hey dog, I fuck with your work. I love what you do. Whereas grew up in the 80s, 90s, that wasn't. You had to do it in a very coy, like, yeah, man, that was all right.
That's all right there. I see you, boy. I see you.
Like, yeah, I see you. Hey, boy. I see you working. The word. Like, no, you love my shit because I love your shit too.
Yeah, give it up to me, man. It's okay.
Yeah, because then that's going to make me want to do more. And then it becomes, oh, where you like my shit too? Yo, we should do something together. Right. And then making that be an organic part of the building. You know, but like I love that your feed is different. It should be, you know what I'm saying? It should like because we're diverse. It's not just like I used to get frustrated, man, because it felt like people thought I was just burning incense all the time. You know what I'm saying? It's like, nah, I like to fuck. I like to tell jokes. I read books. I read comic books. I don't, you know what I'm saying? I suck at video games, so I don't play those. You know what I mean? Like we get to be more than just one thing. And I think and I think cancel culture is a big part of why we've created a system which folks don't feel like they get to be layered anymore. And it doesn't mean we don't hold people accountable for the mistakes, but what it does mean is like, what does forgiveness look like? How do we unpack that? And then also, what's the context of when people show up in the world? So that if you're saying some wild shit in 2000 when you didn't have access to the language, you didn't even know what the language looked like in order to be appropriate or whatever the case might be. How do we give people grace to show up in the world without condemning them all the time?
Speaking of cancel culture, it's been busy. A lot of cancellations over the last weekend, few days. Every day somebody's news getting canceled, man. So what's your opinion on that with some of our celebrities? It's been wild, man.
It's been wild, and I think, you know, I'm all for like a healthy, constructive dialogue about the shit that people do that they should not be doing. You know what I'm saying? Like when we look at the Me Too movement, like an incredibly important way to like weed out the motherfuckers who are showing up in the world and like being dangerous and being violent and practicing misogynoir and like essentially harming the community. But what I do think is that things have to be put into context, right? Like not every offender is a violent criminal. I mean, I don't even like saying criminal because then that just like, but like crimes are different. You know what I'm saying? Like me stealing a notebook is different than me shooting somebody. Me attempting to assault and rape a woman and dehumanize her body is different than me, I don't know, like buying a gun from an op. You know what I'm saying? Like, so we have to look at the context of the situations and have conversations about what does forgiveness look like? Because when brothers and sisters get locked up, incarcerated, and they come home, we have to look at rehabilitation, right? And I think that's the same thing with cancel culture. We got to cancel a person. They're still alive. They still show up in the community, in the world. What does forgiveness look like? But more importantly, also, what does accountability look like? So that a person says, hey, I made a mistake. I own the mistake. This is what I did. And these are the corrective things that I'm going to be doing so that this mistake never happens again. that's how like accountability works, and then that allows room for forgiveness. But if we're not doing those two things in tandem, then it's bullshit.
One other thing that's going around right now is there's a lot of people that do not have the ability to read a room. And they just come out and they say, it might not be racist, it might not be offensive, but it's like, damn, can you not read a room? So one of the things we've been talking about on this show, you're on a college football podcast, so here you are. Dabo Sweeney, he's the head coach of the Clemson Tigers. They're one of the best football teams in America. And today, this morning, yesterday, I'm not sure what day it was, but he came out and he pretty much danced around it. Dabo does not take a stand. Now, I'm not saying we need to cancel him, but like, you got a head football coach who's in a position of power.
Yeah.
Who needs to talk to him? Who needs to, how do you get it through to Dabo that he can make a difference and he does have a powerful platform to speak on that could help others?
That's a really good question. I think confrontation, but I think confrontation in an empathetic way. It's a conversation I was having recently with a colleague and a friend of mine. It was actually this morning about empathy specifically, and how we get to challenge people in a way that creates room for a conversation, and also recognizing that we're all in relationship with each other. So like, here's an example. Like, Josh, you and I are in a relationship, let's say we are partners, right? If we're partners, if you do something that I feel like I'm slighted by, I'm offended by, my job is to go, hey, Josh, I was really hurt and offended by yada, 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 because yada, 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 yada. As a healthy partner in a partnership, you would potentially go, oh man, Joel, I didn't even know I didn't even know that hurt you in that way. I'm sorry. Tell me, like, how else can I show up for you in a way that's going to ensure that doesn't happen again? Or here's what I'm going to try to do, right? That's because we're in a relationship. But we generally, as human beings, don't treat each other like we're in a relationship unless there's proxy involved. Like, you have to be a family member. You have to be a friend. You have to be a lover. But as a person who's connected and recognizing human beings are all in a relationship with each other, which is what I'm trying to get to, that then means I'm having to approach this conversation in a way that's mindful of destructive conversations that are not going to lead to a result. So me attacking you naturally is going to make you uncomfortable. Now, I think there's a way to like engage and say, hey man, listen, bruh, whether it's like a family member, a coach, assistant coach on the team, to be like, listen, I understand what you're saying, but you got to read the room, to your point. And what were you trying to get from that? Because I think people like to know that they're seen. So as opposed to a deliberate attack and response and like, yo, fuck that, man, you don't know what he's talking about. I think it's a lot more about what was your intention behind why you said what you said. And here's how you could have framed that. He's probably going to respond, but I don't understand why I would have had to say that. And it'll be me as a person who cares about him, giving him context to understand the reasoning behind why his approach could have been handled better, because it's not about right or wrong to a certain degree. There are a lot of things that are black and white and right or wrong, like police state sanctioned murder, wrong. But like, you not having a good enough grapple on an educated response as to why these things matter, a lot of that is you just needing to be educated and not knowing how to maneuver. And if I'm going to be an ally,
you got to want to be educated too.
Right.
Exactly.
I think that's the problem.
Yeah. I think that's the problem with Dabo.
If you're not educated, how do you know you're not educated?
And honestly, that's a question. I struggle with that all the time, to be completely honest. Like, how do you make people who are unaware want to be aware?
Right.
And some of that we have no control over. So the void, like part of like when we look at radical love and radical movements, part of it is like creating space for people to show up. But you have to show up, and you have to want to show up. And my thought has always been, if you don't want to show up, then you gotta fucking go. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're not willing to look to do an introspective look at how you're showing up and what this looks like, man, I'm not even.
So are you saying it's time for Dabo to go because when it came around to the Kaepernick protests in 2016, he wasn't about that?
No, he said it wasn't just about that. He was saying people need to leave the country. Like, his lingo was just off back then. He should have been canceled then.
Yeah, you see, and
telling people as a head coach of a public university that they need to leave the country for trying to get fair rights. Like, I think that was way out of line back then. I think this is just a follow up. It's who he is at this point, and I don't think he's trying to educate himself. He need to get up out of here.
There you go. And I think that's it. It's like who's willing to do the work, And what I've seen a lot when I look at like libertarians and like Republicans, right? you know what I'm saying, the Tea Party motherfuckers, right? It'll be like,
yeah.
It's always constructed in a way that makes it feel as if these are opinions. Racism is not an opinion. You know what I'm saying? Prejudice is not an opinion. It's not like, well, what about this? No, dog, this is wrong. But you can't make people see it as wrong if they don't believe it. Because here's the thing, and here's the very tricky thing, which is why I appreciate a person like you, Josh, having this conversation. Because when we talk about whiteness, for some who don't recognize their white privilege, for them, it's comforting to have it. So having to have conversations about it means they have to now deconstruct everything that they've attached to their whiteness, right? So it's like the things that I've benefited from, the world that I live in, right? Like the things that I get, like my head coaching position, right? Even, and like how that is attached to my whiteness to a certain extent. And if I'm not looking at that, if I'm looking at that constructively, that means I have to question a lot of other things that I've benefited from. And it's forcing me to do work. People generally don't like doing work that is going to put them in a position that gives them less power, you know?
Or makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah, I guess I view that as the same as this podcast. Like we don't feel like we compete against anybody in this podcast. The more podcasts, the better. So for me, like I don't feel intimidated by more people being free, for more people having rights. It's the same idea. Yeah,
because you're not attached to your whiteness, bro. Like, and this is the same way I look at when I look at masculinity, when I look at certain things that are used in a way that's creating power dynamics, right? So like when we talk about Black power, when people get offended, Black power is not about shifting dynamics. You know what I'm saying? It's about like equality. When we talk about womanism, right, and Black womanism, it's not about women want to like run the world and like they want to be seen as equals, you know, and whiteness as not just as a skin, but as a context, as a construct, tells you that it's never going to be about this. It's never going to be about this. It has to be about this, because then it's like, it's contradictory to the power. Like Donald Trump, whether he's a racist or not, it's about power. And I think a lot of that class gets tied to that. Class and racism and capitalism are directly intersected.
Always.
I think there's a lot of motherfuckers who are racist by default. Like they want money and they want power, and it just so happens that Black folks and like brown folks in marginalized communities and even poor white folks are not comfortable with that, and that makes them more prejudiced, more biased, more racist. You know, and like the ways in which they try to restrict the freedom of those communities, and Black communities especially, shows up in the way that they hunger for power. Because once you start equating power to your being, that's when we have to start having real conversations about decolonization and like whiteness and what whiteness means and how it attacks marginalized communities in a way that prevents real growth. But you saying to yourself like, nah, man, I don't care. Like the more the merrier. That speaks to you showing up as a human and not attaching your identity to your whiteness.
Right. And you speak a lot about I follow your stuff with mental health.
Yeah.
How do you think we should approach it? Like it's a stigma. A lot of us don't know how to approach mental health. I have a therapist that I see.
That's awesome.
It's not nothing that I share and talk about all the time, but I go see somebody, right?
Yeah.
So how do you think we should approach it, and how do we like introduce this in our community and make it more common?
I think a lot of, you know, I had a conversation with a sister on Twitter about this, and what she was talking about was really holding people accountable for the kind of language you use. I've been in a lot of workshops where it's like, it's small things. I think when we like, yo, that's crazy. I don't say that's crazy anymore, because essentially that's like attaching, right? Like inappropriate language to like something that's actually not crazy. And like, there's a stigma behind using words crazy, you know, like, oh, I'm so bipolar. Like, are you actually? Because bipolar is actually an actual disorder. Right. You know, it's like people actually have to take medication for it. It's like affects their lives. Right. So I think some of that is too is education. And when we talk about stigma, it's I think it's like you. It's you being like you showing up and being like, yo, I'm in therapy. You know, because I don't think there are a lot of Black men who recognize the power in being able to say, I need help. We've taught as men, masculinity, like the antithesis of masculinity is asking for help. It's like you're not supposed to ask for help. Like you're supposed to know everything. You're supposed to be able to do everything. You're not supposed to need assistance from anybody else, especially another man, to get something done. And it's like, man, we passed that. It's like we're human beings, and we're all trying to learn how to navigate this world, man. And when I had my first daughter, I was having serious suicidal ideations because I felt like I was broke. I felt like I wasn't in broke as far as like financially, and even like in my heart space. I didn't have the money. I didn't have the means. I wasn't in relationship with the woman anymore, and so it was like, yo, what am I doing? Am I like another statistic of Black fathers who are having children out of like quote unquote wedlock or whatever? And for me, like I called the suicide hotline at one point because I didn't know, and I was on the verge of just like giving up. And I had a sister. Granted, she didn't identify herself, but I just knew it was a Black woman essentially who was talking to me and telling me, "Hey, listen, you're worth it. How you're showing up in the world matters." And I think that's part of it too. Like we have to, and it goes back to what you brought up, Hamilton. We have to be okay with celebrating each other and also calling each other out and checking in a way that's conducive to us opening up our hearts. And so it's like, yo, how are you, man? Are you good? And like really wondering if you're good, and creating space for you to say that. Like I was in a leadership conference, and this brother, Devin Branderson, he had this thing where he says like, "Are you open?" And that's how I lead from now on. Like I don't give anybody advice or anything. I ask if they're open first, because then it creates space for you to share. And it also creates space for me to go, okay, well, here's what I think about whatever's going on. But that's what we have to do. We have to have more conversations. Like when we talk about racism, it's about actionable change. Mental health is still about that, but a lot of it is really just us having evolved conversations and not just giving the platform to the Charlemagnes of the world. You know what I'm saying? Because I think there's a way that the everyday man is struggling, and I don't need a person who be on radio blasting people and doing all this other shit, like leading the charge. It has to be, it has to be all of us together as a community having these conversations as a whole, I think.
Man, so much, man. I would love to get you back on here to talk about more, man.
I'm here, honestly. Like the fact that y'all even having this conversation, like when you hit me up, I was up because of my daughter. You know what I'm saying? West, she's like 4 months old, man. So she's up, I'm up, and I'm on night duty, man. So I just be up tweeting, writing poems and shit. So you hit me, I was like, oh yeah, of course.
Let's go.
It's about that work. It's about that work, man. I'm always gonna show up.
Yeah, what thing about it is me and Josh had talked about it. We was trying to figure out, man, how we gonna, because we do a morning show as well. So we was trying to figure out the Monday morning show with the protests going on. It's weighing heavy on us. So we was like, man, like we was talking about the work, and I was like, man, how to approach this show. So that's why I was just up late that night. I haven't really got that much sleep since all of this started, to be honest with you, man. Like the COVID-19 was nothing to me. I sleep through that, relax, just spend some more time with my family, man. But this is, what I'm saying, this is different. So I haven't been getting a lot of sleep. So that's why you showed up late that night, man. I appreciate you for coming on and hanging out with us. Tell the people where they can find you at. Any other work you got going on? Other books, other TED Talks, whatever you got going on.
yeah, man. So I just did. Thank you, and again, thank y'all for the platform. It's appreciated.
No problem.
I don't use this leisurely, but I do love y'all because folks that are showing up and doing the work, like it means a lot to me. But Joel, Joel AKAMAG, Joel AKA Mag on Instagram and Twitter. The links to the work are there. I'm always open to DMs, so if people want to buy the books, I can forward them some more information. But that's always going to be in the bio link. TED Talk did in December was on healthy co-parenting, and co-parenting really as a model for equity, to show up in spaces as fathers and as human beings to ensure that we all get an opportunity to chase our dreams and do the work, and also show up as parents for the future, and co-parents as a model just for anybody who's in relationship with one another and wants to do the work and wants to create more space for empathy in that way. So I mean that's where I'm at. I'm pretty active. You already know, on Twitter, Instagram.
Yep.
So holler at me. I'm there.
We'll do, man. We're gonna link up and we're gonna get you on here more often to holler at us about all these social stuff, creatives. We gotta get together, man. We gotta change the world, right?
Yeah, that's it, man. We can't be looking for the next the next Malcolm. Chuck D said something real quick. I mean, Chuck D was like, I'm not Malcolm X, but I might be the one that inspires the next one. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the word.
I think Pac said the same thing. He said, I may not change the world, but I may spark the mind that changed the world, man.
Yeah,
same thing, man.
Exactly. And I think, and he did. right?
We definitely did.
And I think part of the charge for us is to come together and recognize it's bigger than us. It's bigger than it's so big. It's bigger than this moment. And if we can keep reminding ourselves of that, to your point, Josh, earlier, I think if we can keep reminding ourselves of that, like it's not just about this. It's about 20 years from now, like eyes on the prize. It's like when you're playing football, man, like, you know, like you third and inches, like you keep inching up the field for a reason, right? There's like a goal. And if the goal is what we know to be like liberation of all people, then there are things that we need to do in order to make that happen.
Yeah, I've been equating what's going on because, you know, I'm 37, Silk's 37. Yeah. So we've been seeing this stuff for a long time. And we've been seeing this stuff since it was in black and white. Like the first time we heard about race, at least, you know, I did, it was in elementary school. And it was videos of MLK. And we were watching this stuff and it felt so far removed, right? Because it was black and white.
Prize videos and shit. Yeah.
But that was the beginning of change.
Yeah.
And here's what I've been thinking about. I've been relating it to the earth changing and the plate tectonics. And when the earth changes, because it always does, it always changes.
Sure.
It's slow. There's friction. When massive change occurs, there's violence, there's earthquakes. Sometimes there's volcanoes that pop off because change is occurring. And none of it's fast and none of it's smooth.
Yeah.
I just keep thinking about that.
I'm preaching. I tweeted something recently, man. Peace is messy. Peace is messy, man. Like people want peace, and it's like, do you know what that actually looks like? Like peace is not. Martin died for peace, and not to say that we all gotta die, but it's like when the earth is a perfect example of that. Like when you look at plants, like plants coming through soil, right? Like that's not an easy process at all. It looks pretty. The end result, like you get the sun is beaming, you got petals, but the idea of planting a seed, right?
That first sprout to burst through.
Bruh, the movement is a seed, man.
You're in my bag now.
Yeah, he's a plant guy. He got like a house and like he's got a jungle, bro. Like he plants all day. So when you said seeds and plants,
that's it, bro. That's
start blushing.
That's the work, man. That is the work. We are all seeds, man. We are all seeds.
Absolutely.
We treat each other as such. We can grow together, man. You know?
Definitely. Yeah. Once again, man, thank you for hanging out with us on the Big 3 Roll Up, man. We appreciate you, brother.
This is beautiful, man. We'll do this again.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That was dope.